All right, we're going to move to another big headline today. The redacted version of the Mueller report was released about an hour ago. Attorney General William Barr said earlier that evidence against President Trump is, and this is a quote, not sufficient to establish obstruction of justice. Joining us now with more is Yahoo Finance's Jessica Smith. And as people go through this, we're also finding out that Mr. Mueller and his team considered the written answers the president submitted to be, quote, inadequate.
Well, in this report, Mueller says that they wanted to interview the president, but they ended up taking these written answers. He said if they issued a subpoena to have the president talk to them, they would have a significant or a substantial delay in this whole process. So some of the interesting tidbits that we're finding through this report, because it is very, very long, but we do know Mueller says that it does not conclude that the president committed a crime, but it also does not exonerate him. So as we go through some of these incidents that they were looking at when they were trying to decide whether or not there was obstruction of justice, here are some of the things that the special counsel was considering. They were looking at when the special counsel was appointed, the president's reaction to that. Because the president, in this report, it says that he said, "This is the end of my presidency," when the special counsel was appointed. He also told Jeff Sessions, who was the attorney general at the time when he recused himself, "You were supposed to protect me." It goes on here and lists how the president reacted to the special counsel's appointments, and it says that the president tried to get the White House counsel to have Mueller removed. And it says that the White House counsel, Don McGahn, says he felt trapped as the president had called him and asked him to do these things. So it also goes into his meetings with Comey and the Comey firings and asking Comey to let the Flynn thing go. So as you look at all of these instances where you could potentially make the case for obstruction of justice, Mueller says, again, they cannot charge him with a crime, but they do not exonerate him. But Attorney General Barr says it was not enough to charge the president. He said in this press conference this morning that you have to think about context and whether or not the intent of the president was corrupt in all of these situations. And he's saying that he was frustrated and felt like the investigation was hindering his presidency. Take a listen to what he had to say about that this morning.
President Trump faced an unprecedented situation. As he entered into office and sought to perform his responsibilities as president, federal agents and prosecutors were scrutinizing his conduct before and after taking office and the conduct of some of his associates. At the same time, there was relentless speculation in the news media about the president's personal culpability. Yet, as he said from the beginning, there was in fact no collusion.
Now, Democratic lawmakers are not satisfied with Barr's interpretation here. They want to hear from Mueller himself, and many of them want to see the full report, not just the redacted report. Lawmakers are going through this report as we speak now, but eventually some other lawmakers on key committees will get a report that is not redacted, but it will, except for grand jury information. And we know that one committee has already asked Mueller to come testify in a public hearing. House Judiciary Chairman Nadler says he wants Mueller to come testify before the 23rd of May. So we may be hearing from Mueller about his findings in this report, but we're going to keep digging through this. And as we have more, we'll be sure to keep you updated.
Okay, Jess, thank you very much. Joining us is Daniel Lippman, Politico Playbook co-author and Politico reporter. There's so much that's coming out. For instance, we learned that on 3 occasions at least, President Trump informed his staff, this includes Hope Hicks, not to publicly disclose information about the infamous meeting at Trump Tower between his son and the Russians. This seems, it might not be criminal to do that, but it seems as if it goes against what William Barr was trying to do less than an hour and a half ago.
Yeah, as we learn more details, it doesn't seem to line up as much with that initial Barr letter a few weeks ago, where he seemed to be pretty clear that there wasn't much there to this report. And all of these revelations today indicate that Mueller thought that there was a good case to be had against the president for obstruction, but he didn't think it was strong enough. But he just wanted to kind of get all of this down for the history book, that this is how the president acted. And I also think it's interesting how stuff he did behind the scenes privately kind of reflected what he was doing publicly. He was saying on Twitter that Sessions should have protected him. And he said the exact same thing in private, too.
So if the case is I guess I'm still trying to figure out why Mueller didn't feel he had enough to charge him, because Barr's defense of the president seems to be he was under a lot of pressure because he felt he was being unfairly targeted. But I guess, is there an intent, a legal intent aspect to obstruction? Like, not just that you meant to do it, but why you meant to do it?
I think that's the huge question that has not been answered today about what was in Mueller's head as he decided not to recommend charges. He might have thought that the Justice Department would not have, pulled the trigger on this, and he might have, in the back of his head, said, "Well, since I didn't get collusion, I didn't get conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia, then I'm not going to drag the country through what's going to be a long impeachment process, and is going to be a headache for the whole for America. I'm going to let the voters in 2020, which is only a year and a half away, make the ultimate decision about whether they find the president worthy of office, or whether what he's found in this over 400-page report, kind of not high crimes and misdemeanors, but clearly there's a lot in there that is damaging to the president, from instances where he tried to have Jeff Sessions unrecuse himself. He, that was a top priority for him, which we did not know, to instances where he told Reince Priebus to have colleagues and staffers write a letter to try to cover up what Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI, and that's something that Katie McFarland, who is the Deputy National Security Advisor and the nominee for ambassador to Singapore, she said not going to, she didn't give a yes or no answer, so she was not going to get caught up in this because Trump wanted to cover Michael Flynn.
Daniel, Dan Roberts here. We're already hearing that Democratic lawmakers are not satisfied with, Barr's press conference and sort of the findings there. And of course, everyone right now in the media picking over all the things that you've highlighted about all the instances that sure look like a case could have been made. And yet, I have to ask, what could actually happen next in terms of legal events? Because the DOJ did not bring any charges. And so from the perspective of the president, it's sort of wrapped up and done. Is there any reason it's not done? I mean, what could actually happen now in terms of charges for anyone?
I think the attention of the public, at least the Russia obsessives, will go to the Southern District of New York, which is looking into the Trump inauguration and campaign finance violations. And remember, we had always thought that that Trump and his team worried much more about what was going on in New York than the Mueller investigation. The fact that they made this all about no collusion made it so that they could declare victory once they found out, once Mueller declared that there was no collusion. And so we could see charges related to whether they accepted foreign money from the inauguration, what role the president played in Michael Cohen's campaign finance violations, where he was individual number one, and there's at least a dozen other investigations going on. The New York State Attorney General, he can still charge Trump, and so that's kind of where the attention will shift eventually.
I'm going to ask you to make a judgment call here, though. Facts are important, but the narrative that got out before the report was no collusion, when in fact they weren't even looking at collusion. So when we get to the 2020 election, the supporters of President Trump certainly aren't going to be moved by this report, or will they?
Right. Not many of them will be moved, but I think what Democrats actually want to talk about is health care and the economy and jobs and income inequality in this country. They don't want to talk about Russia. And what's ironic is that it used to be that the Adam Schiffs of the world would always talk about Russia when trying to criticize Trump. Now Trump is going to use it against Democrats and say he was the biggest victim here of the deep state. But how that actually reflects into people's real world lives. If you're living in Ohio, I don't think you care as much that Trump had to face an investigation into this unprecedented Russian interference in the 2016 campaign.
All right, Daniel, thank you. Daniel Littman is Political Playbook co-author and Politico reporter. Appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit more about this. Sinan, I want to ask you about it in particular, because it seems as though from the dribs and drabs I'm seeing come out of the report that it sort of reinforces the view of the campaign participants as sort of bumbling, and then that's part of the reason why perhaps there's not more of a case to be made for conspiracy or collusion or what have you. But the administration, and particularly President Trump's managing of messaging around this whole thing, has been pretty masterful.
I mean, I personally think that, the big questions that come out of this report are, what do the Democrats do next? Do they give up this fight and start talking about issues that matter to the American people, or do they continue to push on this issue or not?
And can they do both successfully, I wonder?
And the other question, I think, is that let's not forget that it is very clear that Russia interfered in the election. So what are we doing to harden our democracy against future attacks, social media manipulation? What are we going to do about the 2020 election? Is there going to be another attack? What are going to be the effects of that attack?
Well, there will be.
There will be. Oh, it's inevitable.
I mean, what
Absolutely.
we're doing so far is just railing against big tech companies, right? Which is only going to be so successful and fruitful.
Exactly. And I feel like we need to think a lot more about how we're going to deal with this issue.